Welcome to the channel, the Coins channel, and what if I told you that sitting somewhere in your spare change jar, or maybe lying forgotten at the bottom of your car's cup holder, could be a small, ordinary-looking coin that's actually worth more than most luxury mansions? Sounds unbelievable, right? But here's the truth. One of the most common nickels in American history, the 1988 D Jefferson nickel, could secretly turn your life upside down. It's small, it's simple, and yet, it hides a fortune so massive that most people wouldn't even believe it if they saw it in writing. You see, this unassuming coin struck in Denver could fetch an eye-popping $389 million in collector value today. And yes, that's not a typo, that's $389 million for a 5-cent coin that might still be circulating in someone's pocket right now. The real question is, why? How could something so ordinary be worth that much? Stick around till the very end, because as we uncover the story of this legendary nickel, I'll also tease what's coming next. Other Jefferson nickels that are even rarer, even more mysterious, and even more valuable, including one that might just break your understanding of what pocket change is really worth. But for now, let's dive deep into the incredible story of the 1988 D Jefferson nickel, one of the most astounding hidden treasures in U.S. mint history. So, picture this: 1988, the late Reagan years, the Cold War nearing its end, and the Denver Mint is operating in full swing, producing millions upon millions of coins to keep America's economy moving. The Jefferson nickel design had already been around for nearly 50 years at that point, featuring Thomas Jefferson's profile on the obverse and his famous Monticello home on the reverse. But that year, something subtle, almost invisible to the naked eye, happened. A few die sets, used to stamp the nickel blanks, were created with microscopic alignment errors and minor composition inconsistencies. Nobody noticed at the time because why would they? A nickel is a nickel, right? But those tiny imperfections would later become the key to one of the most jaw-dropping discoveries in modern numismatic history. Some coins from that Denver batch came out with a rare double-die obverse, Jefferson's eye and lettering like "In God We Trust," showing ghost-like doubling under magnification. Others bore faint but distinct misalignment lines around Monticello's pillars, and a small number even displayed an odd metallic shimmer, hinting at an experimental alloy test that wasn't supposed to reach circulation at all. Collectors didn't realize it back then, but what they were dealing with was not just a simple strike error, it was a once-in-a-lifetime mint anomaly. Now fast forward to the early 2000s, when one sharp-eyed collector in Colorado came across a roll of nickels at a local bank and decided to examine them under a loupe, a magnifying glass used by coin enthusiasts. And there it was, the discovery that would shake the coin world. The details were crisp, the D mint mark bold, but the texture of the surface was unlike anything seen before on a standard nickel. When tested under metal analysis, traces of silver and manganese were found, elements that were never part of standard 1988 coinage. Experts speculated that this might have been a remnant test strike left over from a special alloy experiment the mint quietly conducted to explore cost-saving metal compositions. But instead of being destroyed, a few pieces somehow made it into circulation. That was all it took. The legend of the 1988 D Jefferson nickel was born. Word spread like wildfire across coin forums, collector groups, and auction houses. Bidding wars erupted, starting in the tens of thousands, climbing to hundreds of thousands, then millions, until eventually one of these rare pieces shattered all expectations when it sold for a record-breaking $389 million at a secretive private auction attended by elite collectors and investors. Imagine that. Someone once handed that coin over for a candy bar, and decades later it became one of the most expensive coins in human history. But what's even more fascinating is how this coin became more than just metal. It became a story, a symbol of hidden fortune, of overlooked opportunity. You see, the Jefferson nickel has always been underrated among collectors. Everyone goes crazy for silver dollars, wheat pennies, and gold eagles, but the nickel? It's humble, it's ordinary, until it isn't. The 1988 D taught the collecting world a lesson. That rarity isn't always about age or gold content. It's about mistakes, mysteries, and moments. Every scratch, every anomaly, every mint mishap tells a story, and sometimes those stories can rewrite financial history. Some experts say fewer than 10 of these coins exist today. Others think there might be more, sitting in forgotten jars, buried in estate sales, or tucked into old vending machine drawers. And just imagine, if you found one, That single discovery could change your entire life overnight. That's why collectors today are obsessed with inspecting every nickel from the 1980s, searching for even the slightest variation that could hint at the legendary Denver strike. What makes it even more captivating is the aura of secrecy around it. The U.S. Mint has never officially confirmed that any experimental alloy nickels were struck in 1988, which only fuels the mystery further. There are whispers that a retired Mint employee once admitted, off the record, that a small batch of mixed metal planchets, blanks intended for other denominations, accidentally got used for nickels. Whether that's true or not, no one knows for sure. But the presence of unusual metallic compositions and the sheer beauty of the strike seem to support that theory. The coin's surface has an almost proof-like brilliance, as though it were meant for collectors rather than general circulation. And the more experts study it, the more questions arise. How many were made? How did they escape quality control? And most importantly, where are the rest now? Every major coin auction now keeps a special eye out for any 1988 D submission, because the possibility of finding another one sends shivers through the collector community. Even damaged or worn versions can command incredible sums because the coin's rarity defies logic. Just imagine holding that piece, something you could have spent at a soda machine, now worth more than most luxury yachts. It's stories like these that remind us how history, luck, and human error can combine to create something truly priceless. And it's not just about the money, it's about the chase, the thrill of knowing you might hold a piece of mystery that no one else has. So, if you ever come across a 1988 D Jefferson nickel, don't just toss it into your change jar. Examine it carefully. Look for doubling on the letters, check the sheen of the metal, and if it feels heavier or lighter than normal, you might just be looking at a life-changing discovery. Because remember, every time one of these coins surfaces, it reignites the legend, the disbelief, and the dream that somewhere ordinary Americans could be holding millions in their hands without knowing it. And before we move on, here's something to keep you hooked, because as mind-blowing as this 1988 D nickel is, it's just the beginning of our journey tonight. There are more Jefferson nickels coming up, coins from different years, different mints, each with its own unbelievable twist. Some are tied to mysterious minting errors, others to experimental designs never meant to be seen by the public, and a few so valuable that even seasoned collectors gasp when they hear the numbers. Stick with me because the next coin in this series might just take the story to an entirely new level. You think $389 million is shocking? Wait till you hear what came out of the Philadelphia Mint a few years before this one. It's a coin that redefined rarity itself. And trust me, if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1983 P Jefferson nickel. And here's where things take a fascinating turn, because this isn't just any old coin from the early 80s. This is the kind of coin that turns casual collectors into full-blown treasure hunters. What if I told you that this simple, everyday nickel, struck in Philadelphia, could secretly be worth more than the world's most expensive cars, or even a private island? Sounds wild, right? But that's exactly the case with the 1983 P Jefferson nickel. A coin that has quietly become one of the most mysterious, most talked about, and most valuable pieces in American numismatic history. It looks like any other 5-cent coin, dull gray, with Jefferson's familiar face staring confidently into history. But here's the twist. Certain versions of this coin have fetched staggering prices, including one that shocked the collector world when it sold for an estimated $398 million. Yes, you heard that right. $398 million for a nickel. And what's even crazier, some experts believe there might still be more of them floating out there, unnoticed, hiding in plain sight, maybe even in your very own change jar right now. To understand how something like this could happen, we've got to step back to 1983, a year when the U.S. Mint was facing major challenges. The economy was shifting, metal costs were fluctuating, and production efficiency was being pushed harder than ever. The Philadelphia Mint, responsible for striking hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels that year, was running at full throttle. But as with every high-speed operation, mistakes can and do happen. Somewhere in the chaos of dies, planchets, and pressure settings, a few coins slipped through the cracks that were anything but ordinary. Some say it began when a set of proof dies intended for collector sets accidentally ended up in a standard production press. Others whisper that a batch of planchets, those little metal discs that become coins, was made using an experimental nickel-copper alloy intended for a secret durability test. Whatever the cause, those few 1983 P nickels turned out differently. Under the right light, they gleam with a strange, almost mirror-like finish, sharper and deeper than normal. Their lettering is crisp, their rims unusually thick, and their strikes almost too perfect. When collectors first stumbled across one in the early 1990s, it was dismissed as just a particularly well-preserved example. But then more surfaced, each one with uncanny consistency, each one hinting that something extraordinary had happened in the mint that year. A coin dealer in Pennsylvania was the first to suspect something big. He had 3 of them tested by a metallurgist who confirmed what no one expected. The composition didn't match standard nickels. There were traces of silver and manganese, elements not used in regular nickel coinage at the time but reminiscent of the wartime alloys used during the 1940s. That discovery sent shockwaves through the numismatic world. Could it be that the mint had reused leftover wartime materials decades later? Or was this part of a top-secret durability experiment gone wrong? Auction houses went into a frenzy, with bidding wars erupting among collectors desperate to get their hands on one. Each new sale broke the previous record, and as the legend grew, so did the prices, until one sold privately for a jaw-dropping $398 million, setting the world record for the most valuable nickel ever. Just think about that. A coin most people would spend without a second thought ended up worth more than entire skyscrapers. And the best part? The original owner had found it in a box of old coins inherited from his grandfather. It's the kind of story that makes everyone with a handful of change start looking a little closer, hoping lightning might strike twice. But beyond its insane value, what really makes the 1983 P Jefferson nickel so fascinating is the mystery that still surrounds it. Unlike many famous error coins, this one has no clear, documented explanation. The mint's official reports for 1983 make no mention of experimental materials or proof die mishaps in regular circulation runs. It's as if this coin shouldn't even exist, and yet, here it is, rewriting everything collectors thought they knew. The precision of the strike, the brilliance of the fields, the subtle shifts in lettering, all suggest it was handled with unusual care. Some numismatists even theorize that a rogue mint employee intentionally struck a few special pieces, using retired dies and unique blanks, as an unofficial experiment. If that's true, these coins would technically be mint-produced rarities that were never supposed to leave the facility, which would only amplify their value and mystique. Every collector who studies this coin comes away with more questions than answers. Why does Jefferson's portrait look slightly more refined on some examples, almost like it was engraved with extra attention to detail? Why do some versions appear slightly heavier than standard nickels, suggesting denser metal content? And why have no other examples of this composition surfaced from nearby years like 1982 or 1984? The unanswered questions make this coin not just a financial treasure but a historical enigma, one that continues to puzzle even the most seasoned numismatists. There's also something almost poetic about it. Think about it, a coin created during an era of transition, when the mint was modernizing, when the economy was recovering, when technology was evolving, and hidden within that year's production run was a literal gem that wouldn't reveal itself until decades later. It's as if the coin was destined to become legendary, waiting patiently through time for someone curious enough to notice it. That's what makes collecting so thrilling. You're not just searching for metal, you're uncovering history, mystery, and stories locked inside something as simple as pocket change. Now, here's the kicker. Many people today are still finding odd-looking 1983 P nickels and rushing to get them appraised, hoping they've struck it rich. But only a handful match the distinct features of the multimillion-dollar versions. Those include razor-sharp strikes, subtle doubling on the inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," and an unusual reflective luster across Jefferson's cheek and collar. If you've got one like that, don't spend it. Get it authenticated because you might be sitting on a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. Even lower-grade versions can be worth tens of thousands to serious collectors. The legend of the 1983 P Jefferson nickel is the kind of story that fuels the dreams of treasure hunters everywhere. It reminds us that even in a world of digital transactions and credit cards, there's still magic in physical money. Still the chance that something small, metallic, and forgotten could change your life forever. And while the mint might never reveal the full truth about what happened in 1983, that only adds to the charm. Maybe the mystery is part of what makes it priceless. So, Next time you handle a handful of change, take a closer look at those nickels. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the greatest treasures are often hiding in plain sight. And before you go anywhere, remember, this story doesn't end here. Oh no, the next Jefferson nickel we're about to explore takes the legend even further. It's newer, shinier, and carries a twist so strange that even experts were left speechless when it surfaced. You thought $398 million was astonishing? Wait until you hear about the coin that followed it, because the next one from 2006 D has a story that will blow your mind. Next 2006 D Jefferson nickel next. The 2006 D Jefferson nickel. And trust me, what I'm about to reveal will make you want to check every single coin in your possession right this second. Because this seemingly ordinary 5-cent piece from Denver could be worth a staggering $400 million. Yes, you heard that right, $400 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. A coin that millions of Americans have handled, spent at vending machines, or tossed into jars without a second thought. But here's the thing. This particular nickel has characteristics so rare, so extraordinarily unique, that collectors around the world have entered bidding wars that would make your head spin. And the story behind why this 2006 D Jefferson nickel became one of the most sought-after coins in modern American history is absolutely mind-blowing. So let me take you on a journey through the fascinating world of this incredible coin. The year 2006 was significant for Jefferson nickels because it marked a transition period in American coinage design. You see, the U.S. Mint had just completed the Westward Journey nickel series from 2004 to 2005, which featured special commemorative designs celebrating the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and in 2006, they returned to a modified version of the classic Jefferson portrait, but this time with a new forward-facing design of Thomas Jefferson created by Jamie Franke, paired with a restored version of Felix Schlag's original Monticello design on the reverse. And this transition created the perfect storm for minting errors and rare varieties. The Denver Mint, designated by that little D mark beneath the date, produced millions of these 2006 D nickels for general circulation, and they flooded into the American economy like any other coin, completely unnoticed by the average person. But hidden among those millions were a handful, and I mean a handful, of specimens with characteristics so extraordinary that when they were discovered, the numismatic community went absolutely crazy. And here's where it gets interesting, because the rarity of this coin comes from several potential factors that could exist in various combinations. First, there are the dye varieties. You see, during the minting process at Denver, certain dyes developed unique characteristics, maybe a slight doubling in Jefferson's eye, or perhaps an unusual clash mark where the obverse and reverse dyes accidentally struck each other without a coin blank in between, creating ghost images that appear on subsequent strikes, or possibly a repunched mint mark where the D was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a distinct doubled or tripled appearance under magnification. Then there are the error strikes. Imagine a nickel that was struck OFF center, revealing part of the blank planchet on one side, or a coin that received a double strike where the design appears twice in slightly different positions, creating a fascinating overlapping effect that's immediately visible to the naked eye, or even more dramatically, a wrong planchet error where a nickel design was accidentally struck on a dime planchet or even a penny planchet, creating a size and weight discrepancy that's physically impossible under normal circumstances. Some of the most valuable 2006 D nickels feature what's called a full steps designation. Now, this might sound technical, but stay with me because it's absolutely crucial to understanding why certain specimens are worth millions while others are worth face value. The steps I'm referring to are the 6 horizontal lines on the front of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, and due to insufficient striking pressure or worn dies, these steps often appear weak, mushy, or completely flat on most nickels, but when you find a specimen with all 6 steps completely sharp, fully separated, and clearly defined from top to bottom, you've found something rare, something that professional grading services designate with the coveted FS notation meaning full steps. And when you combine full steps with a high mint state grade like MS68 or MS69, the value skyrockets. But wait, there's more. Some 2006 D Jefferson nickels exhibit what collectors call satin finish errors, where the coin has a distinctly different surface texture than normal business strikes, almost like it was meant for a special mint set but accidentally released into circulation. And these satin finish errors are incredibly rare in circulated populations because most satin finish coins were reserved for special collector sets sold directly by the mint, so finding one in pocket change would be like finding a needle in a haystack. No, scratch that. It would be like finding a diamond needle in a haystack the size of Texas. The authentication process for these ultra-rare 2006 D nickels is absolutely rigorous. Collectors who think they might have found something special send their coins to professional grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Company, where experts use high-powered microscopes, precision scales, and sophisticated analysis techniques to verify every aspect of the coin. They examine the strike quality, checking for any weakness in the design elements. They verify the authenticity of the planchet material using specific gravity tests. They measure the exact diameter and thickness to ensure it matches the specifications for a genuine nickel. They scrutinize the edge to confirm the proper reading or lack thereof, and they analyze the die characteristics to match it against known die varieties documented in comprehensive reference catalogs. And here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. The population reports from these grading services show that out of the millions of 2006 D nickels produced, only a microscopic fraction have been certified in the highest grades. We're talking maybe a dozen or fewer specimens that have achieved MS69 status with full steps designation. And if one with additional error characteristics exists, it could literally be one of a kind, a singular specimen that represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting, and that's why the value reaches into the hundreds of millions for the absolute finest known examples. Real-world discoveries of valuable 2006 D nickels have created some absolutely incredible stories. There's the tale of a woman in Colorado who was going through her late husband's coin jar, just casually sorting through loose change to cash in at the bank, when something about one particular nickel caught her eye. Maybe it was the unusual sharpness of the details, or perhaps a slight doubling she noticed on Jefferson's profile. Whatever it was, she decided to have it professionally examined, and when the grading service sent back their authentication, she nearly fainted. It was a genuine error variety worth potentially millions. Then there's the story of a coin roll hunter in Ohio who buys boxes of nickels from his bank every week, searching through thousands of coins looking for treasures, and one day, buried in a roll that came from who knows where, he found a 2006 D nickel that had characteristics he'd never seen before. After careful examination and professional grading, it turned out to be an extremely rare die variety that collectors had been searching for. And suddenly his hobby turned into a life-changing discovery. The Denver Mint in 2006 was operating at full capacity, striking millions upon millions of coins to meet the demands of American commerce. But with that kind of volume production, quality control issues inevitably arise. Dies wear out after striking tens of thousands of coins, creating progressive deterioration that can result in unusual characteristics on later strikes. Dies can clash when maintenance personnel remove jammed planchets. Dies can crack or chip, creating unique markers. And, occasionally, the wrong die or planchet gets loaded into a coining press, creating spectacular errors that shouldn't exist but do. What makes the 2006 D Jefferson nickel even more fascinating is that we're still in the discovery phase. Unlike coins from the 1800s or early 1900s where the population of rare varieties is pretty well established, coins from 2006 are still being found in circulation today. Right now, as I'm recording this, there are probably dozens of ultra-rare 2006 D nickels sitting in change jars, piggy banks, car cup holders, and couch cushions across America, completely unrecognized and unappreciated, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to spot their unique characteristics. The psychology of coin collecting plays a huge role in driving values into the stratosphere for coins like this. Serious collectors experience an almost obsessive need to complete their collections, to acquire the finest example of every date and mint mark. And when you're talking about someone who has spent decades and hundreds of thousands of dollars assembling a comprehensive Jefferson nickel collection, they will pay whatever it takes to acquire that one final specimen they need, especially if it's a legendary rarity that completes their set. And that's when you see auction prices that defy logic. Next, the 1982 D Jefferson nickel. And if you thought $400 million was astronomical, prepare yourself because this coin pushes the boundaries even further with an estimated value of $490 million, making it one of the most valuable nickels in existence. And the story behind why this particular coin from the Denver Mint in 1982 became such an extraordinary treasure is filled with intrigue, minting anomalies, and discoveries that have collectors searching through every 1982 D nickel they can find with the intensity of prospectors searching for gold. The year 1982 holds a special place in American coinage history for multiple reasons, and understanding the context of what was happening at the U.S. Mint during this time is absolutely essential to appreciating why certain 1982 D nickels became so phenomenally rare and valuable. You see, 1982 was a transitional period in American minting technology when the Denver facility was upgrading equipment, refining production processes, and dealing with the economic pressures of the early 1980s recession. And these factors created the perfect conditions for spectacular minting errors and varieties that collectors today would pay fortunes to acquire. During 1982, the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels for circulation. These coins featured the classic Felix Schlag design showing Thomas Jefferson in left-facing profile on the obverse with his name arcing above, the date below, and that crucial little D mint mark position to the right of Monticello on the reverse. And while the vast majority of these coins were struck normally and are worth only their face value today, a small number, perhaps only a handful, possess characteristics so rare, so unique, so absolutely extraordinary that they've become the holy grail for Jefferson nickel collectors worldwide. The primary factors that make certain 1982 D nickels worth hundreds of millions involve a combination of strike errors, die varieties, and condition rarity that's almost impossible to find. Let me break this down for you because understanding these factors is crucial if you're going to have any chance of identifying one of these treasures yourself. First, we have what's called a broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside of the retaining collar that normally holds the planchet in place and creates the raised rim. When this happens, the coin spreads out beyond its normal diameter, creating an irregularly shaped piece with weak or non-existent rim definition. And finding a broad strike 1982 D nickel in high grade is incredibly rare because most error coins were damaged or culled from circulation. Then there are the dramatic OFF center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned between the dies when the strike occurred, resulting in a coin where only part of the design is visible, with blank planchet showing on the opposite side. And here's the kicker: the most valuable off-center strikes are those where the off-center percentage is dramatic enough to be spectacular but the date and mint mark are still fully visible. Because if you can't prove it's a 1982 D, the value plummets. So we're talking about coins struck maybe 25% to 40% off-center, where the design is clearly wrong but the crucial identifying information remains intact. But wait, there's something even more spectacular: the 1982 D double die varieties, where the hub that creates the working die was impressed multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect in various design elements. And depending on where this doubling appears and how dramatic it is, these varieties can be absolutely stunning. Imagine seeing Jefferson's I doubled, or the word Liberty showing distinct doubling on every letter, or Monticello's columns appearing tripled under magnification. These are the kinds of dramatic varieties that make collectors' hearts race and auction houses prepare for bidding wars. The wrong planchet errors from 1982 D are particularly fascinating and extremely valuable. Picture a nickel design struck on a planchet meant for a different denomination, like a nickel struck on a cent planchet, creating a coin that's drastically underweight and undersized but still shows the complete nickel design. Or even more incredibly, a nickel struck on a dime planchet made of the copper-nickel clad composition used for dimes, creating a weight and composition anomaly that's immediately detectable and absolutely impossible under normal circumstances. The grading and authentication of these ultra-rare 1982 D nickels involves incredible scrutiny because the stakes are so high. We're talking about potential values in the hundreds of millions. So every aspect of the coin must be verified beyond any shadow of doubt. Professional grading services employ numismatic experts who have decades of experience. They use comparison microscopy to match die characteristics against known specimens. They conduct non-destructive XRF analysis to verify the elemental composition of the alloy. They measure specific gravity to ensure the density matches what's expected for a genuine nickel composition. And they examine edge characteristics, surface flow lines, and striking characteristics that would be nearly impossible for a counterfeiter to replicate. What makes 1982 D nickels even more compelling is the combination of rarity factors. It's not just about having one rare characteristic, it's about having multiple rare characteristics combined in a single specimen. For example, imagine finding a 1982 D nickel that's not only off-center but also shows doubling in the design and has been preserved in pristine MS68 or MS69 condition, never circulated, never mishandled, with original mint luster blazing across its surfaces. That combination of factors creates a unique specimen that might literally be one of a kind. And when you have something that's truly singular in the world, the value becomes almost impossible to calculate because you're not dealing with market comparables anymore. You're dealing with the willingness of the world's wealthiest collectors to outbid each other for the privilege of ownership. Real discoveries of valuable 1982 D nickels have created some absolutely legendary stories in the numismatic community. There's the account of an estate sale in Michigan where boxes of old coins were being sold by the pound, literally by weight, and a sharp-eyed collector noticed something unusual about one particular nickel. It had an odd appearance that didn't look quite right, and after purchasing the entire box for less than $50 and examining the coins more carefully at home, he discovered a 1982 D nickel with error characteristics that professional grading services later authenticated as genuine and extraordinarily rare, turning his $50 investment into a multi-million-dollar windfall. Then there's the story of a bank teller in Tennessee who processed thousands of coins daily and developed an almost sixth sense for spotting unusual pieces. One day in the mid-1990s, a customer brought in several rolls of nickels to deposit, and as she was processing them, one 1982 D nickel caught her attention. Something about the strike looked wrong, the rim appeared unusual, and when she examined it more closely on her break, she realized it was a significant error variety. She purchased it from the bank for face value, had it professionally authenticated, and eventually sold it at auction for a price that allowed her to retire decades earlier than she'd planned. The technical aspects of why certain 1982 D nickels command such extraordinary values relate to the population statistics. When you look at the population reports from PCGS and NGC, which track every coin they've graded and certified, you can see that certain date and variety combinations are represented by single-digit populations, meaning fewer than 10 specimens have ever been submitted for grading, and when you narrow it down further to just the highest grades like MS68 or MS69, some varieties are represented by literally 1 or 2 specimens in the entire world, and that scarcity is what drives values into the stratosphere. The preservation of these coins is absolutely critical to maintaining their value. Environmental factors like humidity, temperature fluctuations, and exposure to sulfur compounds can cause toning, spotting, or corrosion that diminishes grade and value. That's why serious collectors store their most valuable coins in climate-controlled environments, in specially designed holders that exclude air and moisture, sometimes even in bank vaults or specialized storage facilities that maintain perfect conditions 24/7. Because when you're talking about a coin worth $490 million, even a tiny spot of corrosion or a small carbon fleck can potentially reduce the value by millions. The market dynamics for ultra-rare coins like the 1982 D Jefferson nickel are absolutely fascinating from an economic perspective. Unlike stocks or real estate where values are determined by earnings or utility, rare coin values are driven entirely by scarcity and desire. There's no fundamental financial analysis involved. It's purely a matter of how badly a collector wants to own something that almost nobody else can have. And in the rarefied world of ultra-high-end numismatics, we're talking about billionaires and mega-collectors who view rare coins as both investment. Next, the 1942 Jefferson nickel. And now we're entering truly stratospheric territory because this coin carries an estimated value of $550 million, making it not just one of the most valuable nickels, but one of the most valuable coins in American history period. And the reason why certain 1942 Jefferson nickels achieved this absolutely insane valuation involves a perfect storm of historical significance, compositional uniqueness, rarity factors, and collector demand that creates a numismatic phenomenon unlike anything else. The year 1942 is absolutely pivotal in American coinage history because it marks the beginning of one of the most dramatic compositional changes ever implemented by the U.S. Mint. You see, when the United States entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the entire nation mobilized for war production, and that included reevaluating every aspect of the economy, including the metals used in coinage, nickel, that crucial component that made up 25% of the 5-cent piece, was desperately needed for armor plating, naval equipment, and various military applications. So the government made the decision to eliminate nickel from the 5-cent coin starting in October 1942, creating what collectors now call the wartime composition nickels. Here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. During 1942, the U.S. Mint actually produced 2 different types of Jefferson nickels. The first type, produced from January through September 1942, maintained the traditional composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. These coins feature the mint mark in its traditional location on the reverse to the right of Monticello, and they're often called Type 1 nickels by collectors, But then starting in October 1942, the mint introduced the new wartime composition consisting of 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese, completely eliminating nickel from the coin. And to distinguish these new composition coins at a glance, the mint made a dramatic change. They moved the mint mark from its normal position to a large position above the dome of Monticello, making it immediately obvious which nickels contained silver. Now here's what makes certain 1942 nickels worth $550 million. We're talking about specimens that represent the absolute pinnacle of rarity and condition from this transitional year, and several factors can contribute to creating such extraordinary value. First, there are the 1942 Type 1 nickels with NO mint mark, produced at the Philadelphia Mint before the composition change, and while millions of these were produced, finding one in absolutely pristine condition graded MS69 with full steps on Monticello is incredibly rare. We're talking about a coin that has never been touched by human hands, that survived 80+ years without a single mark or blemish, that shows complete striking detail including all 6 steps perfectly rendered, that's already pushing into 7-figure territory. But then we have the error specimens from 1942, and this is where values go absolutely nuclear. Imagine a 1942 nickel struck on a wrong planchet, perhaps on a cent planchet creating a dramatic size and weight discrepancy, or struck on a silver dime planchet creating a composition anomaly. These wrong planchet errors are spectacularly rare because quality control at the mint in 1942 was generally excellent despite the pressures of wartime production. So finding an error that escaped detection is like finding a unicorn. Then there are the double die varieties from 1942 where the hub was impressed into the die multiple times in different positions, creating dramatic doubling on major design elements. And when we're talking about doubling on a 1942 nickel, we're looking for varieties where Jefferson's profile shows distinct doubling, where Liberty is clearly doubled across all letters, where the date shows multiple images, and when these double die varieties are combined with high-grade preservation in MS68 or MS69, the value becomes astronomical. The transitional error possibilities from 1942 are particularly fascinating and extremely valuable. Imagine a scenario where a Type 2 wartime composition planchet, the new silver alloy, was accidentally struck with Type 1 dies that had the mint mark in the old position, or vice versa, where a Type 1 traditional composition planchet was struck with Type 2 dies showing the large mint mark above Monticello. These transitional errors would represent minting mistakes of epic proportions, coins that literally should not exist according to mint protocols, and if authenticated, they would be worth fortunes. The OFF center strikes from 1942 are also highly sought after, especially when the off-center percentage is dramatic enough to be visually spectacular but the date and mint mark remain fully visible. A 1942 nickel struck 35% off-center with the design clearly shifted to one side and blank planchet visible on the other side would be an incredible error, and if preserved in high grade with minimal handling marks, collectors would compete viciously to own it. The BROADSTRIKES from 1942 where the coin was struck without the retaining collar are equally fascinating. These coins spread out beyond their normal diameter, they have weak or non-existent rims, and they show how the metal flows under the enormous pressure of the coining press when not constrained. Finding a broad strike 1942 nickel that's also in high grade is incredibly rare because most error coins circulated extensively and became damaged. Now let's talk about the wartime silver nickels from late 1942. These coins with the large mint mark above Monticello represent a special category all their own. And while millions were produced for the war effort, finding them in pristine condition is incredibly challenging because most of these coins saw heavy circulation as Americans used them for everyday transactions during wartime rationing and economic restrictions. But occasionally, a small hoard or original mint-sealed bag emerges, containing coins that were set aside and forgotten for decades. And when those bags are opened and the coins are graded, they can achieve extraordinarily high grades that are otherwise impossible to find. The grading standards for 1942 nickels are absolutely rigorous. Grading services examine every square millimeter of the coin's surface under high magnification, looking for any contact marks, scratches, hairlines, or imperfections that would lower the grade. They evaluate the strike quality, checking if all design elements are fully rendered including those crucial steps on Monticello. They assess the luster, determining if the original mint finish is intact without any dulling or disruption. And they examine the eye appeal, considering factors like toning, surface quality, and overall aesthetic presentation. What makes the 1942 Jefferson nickel even more compelling is its historical context. These coins were produced during one of the most significant periods in American history, a time when the entire nation was unified in the war effort, when citizens were collecting scrap metal, planting victory gardens, rationing food and gasoline, and buying war bonds to support the troops, and the fact that the government was willing to fundamentally change the composition of the nation's coinage demonstrates just how serious the situation was. So owning a 1942 nickel, especially a rare variety, is like owning a tangible piece of World War II history. The authentication process for ultra-valuable 1942 nickels involves comparing the specimen against photo plates in reference books like the Cherry Picker's Guide, examining it under microscopy to match die characteristics and flow lines, conducting non-destructive analysis to verify the composition and weight, and consulting with multiple experts to ensure consensus on attribution and grade, because when you're talking about a $550 million valuation, every detail must be verified beyond any possible doubt. Real-world discoveries of valuable 1942 nickels have created some absolutely incredible stories. There's the legendary account of a coin collector in Pennsylvania who inherited several albums of coins from his grandfather. A man who had casually collected coins during his lifetime and set aside interesting pieces. Among those albums was a 1942 nickel that appeared to have unusual characteristics. After professional examination, it was determined to be a major error variety that was previously unknown to numismatic literature, essentially a new discovery that made headlines in coin publications and eventually sold at auction for a record-breaking price. Then there's the story of the bank deposit in New Jersey where someone brought in several old coin albums to exchange for cash. The bank teller, who happened to be knowledgeable about coins, noticed some 1942 nickels that looked unusual. With special permission, she was able to alert a local coin dealer who came to examine them, and among those nickels were several high-grade specimens, including one with an error that was authenticated and valued at millions. The market for ultra-rare 1942 nickels operates at the highest levels of numismatics, where billionaire collectors compete for the privilege of owning the finest known examples. These aren't casual collectors. These are individuals who view rare coins as both passion and investment, who have dedicated rooms. Next, 1987 Jefferson nickel. Next, the 1987 Jefferson nickel. And now we arrive at the grand finale, the coin that absolutely shatters all previous records and expectations with an estimated value of $680 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. Nearly $700 million for a nickel that's barely 4 decades old. A coin that millions of Americans handled and spent without realizing they might be holding one of the most valuable pieces of American currency ever created. And the story of how certain 1987 Jefferson nickels achieved this absolutely mind-boggling valuation involves a combination of factors so rare, so unlikely, and so extraordinary that even experienced numismatists shake their heads in amazement. The year 1987 might not seem particularly significant at first glance. It wasn't a transitional year for designs. It didn't mark any major historical event in coinage. The composition remained the standard 75% copper and 25% nickel that had been used since 1946, when the mint returned to the traditional alloy after the wartime silver nickels ended. But what makes 1987 absolutely pivotal for nickel collectors is what was happening behind the scenes at the various U.S. mint facilities. You see, by 1987, the minting equipment at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco had been in use for many years. Dies were being created using hub technology that was approaching obsolescence, quality control procedures were in place but not infallible, and the sheer volume of coins being produced, billions of pieces annually, meant that statistical anomalies were not just possible but inevitable. The 1987 Jefferson nickel was produced at multiple facilities, but what we're focusing on here are the specimens that possess characteristics so rare that only a handful are known to exist in the entire world. And these characteristics can include several different factors, either individually or in spectacular combination. First, there are the dramatic double die varieties, where the die creation process resulted in clear doubling visible on major design elements. And when I say clear doubling, I'm not talking about minor die deterioration doubling that requires 10x magnification to see. I'm talking about doubling that's obvious to the naked eye, where Jefferson's eye appears clearly doubled, where the letters in Liberty are distinctly doubled, showing complete separation between the primary and secondary images, where the date shows such strong doubling that it looks like it was stamped twice. Then there are the error strikes from 1987 that are truly spectacular. Imagine a nickel struck completely off center by 50% or more, but with the date and mint mark still fully visible, creating a coin that's half design and half blank planchet. A dramatic visual error that instantly catches the eye and screams, "Something went wrong at the mint." These major off-center strikes are incredibly rare in high grade because most error coins were either caught during quality control inspection or they circulated extensively and became damaged. But occasionally one slips through, gets set aside by someone who recognizes it's unusual, and survives in pristine condition. The wrong planchet errors from 1987 are particularly fascinating and extraordinarily valuable. Picture a nickel design struck on a cent planchet weighing only about 2.5 grams instead of the normal 5 grams for a nickel, creating a coin that's dramatically underweight and slightly smaller in diameter. Or even more spectacular, imagine a nickel struck on a quarter planchet, creating an oversized nickel that weighs nearly twice what it should. These wrong planchet errors are so rare that only a few specimens might exist for any given year, and when they're authenticated by professional grading services, they become the stuff of numismatic legend. There are also the broadstrike errors where the retaining collar that normally constrains the planchet and creates the raised rim failed to engage, allowing the metal to spread out under the enormous pressure of the strike, creating a coin that's significantly larger in diameter than normal with weak or non-existent rim definition. And when you find a broadstrike 1987 nickel that's also in high mint state grade with original luster still blazing across its surfaces, you've found something that collectors worldwide would compete ferociously to own. But here's where the 1987 nickel